Okay, so chapter 17, part 3, League of Nations. And the League of Nations, one of the things that it had right off the bat were mandates, and these are territories. They were ruled like colonies, but instead of like England just controlling one place, they're actually under the supervision of the League of Nations. So, according to the Covenant of the League of Nations, its whole purpose was to promote disarmament. In other words, have countries give up a lot of their weapons, because countries had way too many weapons at that time because they just got through fighting the World War One, and of course to prevent war. They never thought that there would be a second World War, and so their main cause was pretty much peace and disarmament. So they had no military power, though, the League of Nations. So it depended on the help of its member states. So each country that was in the League of Nations, that's where they would get their military power from. So it consisted of a council, which you see up here at the top right. This is a council that had 5 permanent countries that were in it all the time, and then and that represented the great power. So these are going to be the main countries at the time. And then it had an assembly, which is this right here, where all the different countries had at least one vote. So really what it's made up of is the assembly. All the countries had a single vote, but then the council was really the most important countries. So they were a little bit more important than the assembly. It also created a court of international justice where you could put a person from another country on trial, and then you could punish them however you wanted to. So, and that stays with the UN later on. So in the council, you had 5 permanent countries that were in there. So France, Great Britain, Italy, Japan, and the United States. Then they would rotate in countries from the assembly into the council. Okay, so if you were in assembly, you actually got to be in the council every once in a while. And so they just rotated through. Here's a map. The dark blue is the original countries that we're in. Light blue are the original countries in that left and then came back. So, you had a lot of different movement in the League of Nations. So World War I in the Middle East. So World War I had also led to the end of the Ottoman Empire. This was the Ottoman Empire in 1914. And really, the Ottoman Empire was pretty much just this dark brown area. These areas had already gotten away from the Ottoman Empire before World War I. So here's the Ottoman Empire right before World War I, and then it's gone after World War I. So really, what's left of it is Turkey. All these other places are taken away and become mandates. So they're kind of ruled by the League of Nations, but they're really mainly ruled by the French and the British. So the Sultan had made the mistake of, during World War I, joining the Central Powers. So it joined on the side of Germany and Austria-Hungary, and really it joined because they were the enemy of Russia and had been for a while. So Russia was on the Allied power side of Britain, France, and Russia. So of course the Ottomans got in to go against the Russians. So one of the things that happened, was the Armenian massacres, and this was in the Ottoman Empire. So for centuries, Armenian Christians had lived in the Ottoman Empire, and some of the Armenians wanted independent Armenian state, which is the country of Armenia today. So the Ottoman government began to disarm the Armenian citizens. So they came in and took any weapons away from them that they had. And they feared that they might be sympathetic to Christian Russia. So the Armenians are Christian, and the Russians are also Eastern Orthodox Christians. So they thought that when World War I would break out, that these Armenians would help the Russians against the Ottoman Empire. So Armenian political leaders, educators, writers, and clergy were all jailed, then and eventually murdered. That should be murdered or shot. Okay, so Turkish soldiers gathered over 1 million Armenian men, women, and children, sent them to death marches into the Syrian desert, to where they just died because of the climate. And then they also had firing squads, burnings, drowning, poisonings, and drugs. Killed 1.5 million Armenians. So World War I and the Middle East continued. So after the war, the Allies took away the Turkish possessions in Arabia. So the Ottomans lost Arabia, Syria, and Palestine. So to gain support during the fighting, the British government had promised the Arabs that their independence. So they said, Arabs, if you guys help us during World War I, you fight against the Ottomans, then you'll get all this territory and it'll be independent and you'll get to rule it yourselves. So these areas were instead divided between the British and the French. as mandates. So some of the territory that the Arabs thought that they were going to get, that they were promised, ends up being given to Britain and France under mandates from the League of Nations. So uprisings in Egypt and Arabia finally led to their independence. So the area of Saudi Arabia becomes independent. The area of Egypt becomes independent because they break away from the British and the French. So the Allies also planned to take away much of the Turkish heartland in Asia Minor. So they were actually going to take away this whole green area also. And that's when General Mustafa Kemal, known as Ataturk, organized a resistance to the Allied attempts to tear Turkey apart. So to take this piece away from the Ottoman Empire also. So he kept Turkey together and keeps it as the country that it is today. So a new parliament declared the birth of Turkey as a secular state, which means they're not going to be run by religion. So they're really the first country in here that's not going to be run by religion. So after 2 years of fighting, Ataturk preserved Turkey in Asia Minor, and he also abolished the Sultanate in 1923.